There is a kind of love that doesn't raise your heartbeat in fear, but steadies it. A love that doesn't make you question your worth at 2 a.m., replaying conversations in your head. A love that feels less like chaos and more like coming home. Real love doesn't demand constant proof. It doesn't arrive with anxiety mixed signals or the fear of being abandoned for being yourself. Instead, it sits beside you in silence, respects your pace, and chooses you without games. Today, we're not talking about the love that drains you. We're talking about the love that drains you. We're talking about the love that heals you, the kind of love that feels safe, calm, and real, the kind of love that finally lets you breathe. There is a version of love that doesn't arrive with fireworks or panic, doesn't knock the wind out of your chest or leave you wondering where you stand. It doesn't demand urgency, performance, or constant reassurance. Instead, it enters quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like a warm light left on in a room you didn't realize was dark. This kind of love doesn't feel dramatic. It feels familiar. It feels steady. It feels like home. Home is not loud. Home does not rush you. Home does not test your loyalty every day. Home does make you earn rest. When love feels like home, your body understands it before your mind does. Your shoulders drop. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts slow down. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. You stop bracing yourself for impact. You start existing instead of surviving. So many people mistake anxiety for passion. They think love is supposed to hurt a little, confuse you a little, keep you guessing. They confuse intensity with intimacy. They confuse longing with connection. But the love that feels like home doesn't make you feel small or uncertain. It doesn't disappear and reappear to keep your attention. It doesn't speak in riddles or silence. It speaks in presence, in showing up, in showing you again, and showing you again and again without making a show of it. Love that feels like home is consistent, not perfect, not flawless, but consistent. The tone doesn't change depending on mood. The affection doesn't vanish as punishment. The connection doesn't feel fragile, like one wrong word could shatter everything. You don't feel like you're walking on emotional glass. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be imperfect. This kind of love doesn't require you to shrink, doesn't require you to soften your truth to keep the peace. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to be chosen. Instead, it invites you to show up fully. It makes room for your voice, your feelings, your boundaries, doesn't see your sensitivity as weakness or your honesty as a threat. It listens without preparing a defense. It responds instead of reacts. When love feels like home, you don't fear silence. Silence is not a punishment, it's just space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to exist together without the pressure to perform. You don't feel the need to constantly check your phone. You're not decoding messages for hidden meanings. You trust the connection because it has given you reasons to trust, not just words. Safety is the foundation here. Emotional safety, the kind that lets you relax into yourself. You're not constantly worried about being misunderstood or dismissed. You're not afraid that expressing a need will make you too much. You're not afraid that vulnerability will be used against you later. You know that when you speak, you will be met with care, even if there's disagreement. Disagreements still happen. Love that feels like home doesn't avoid conflict. It just doesn't turn conflict into warfare. There's no need to win, no need to dominate, no need to hurt each other to feel heard. Problems are approached as something to solve together, not something to use as leverage. The goal is understanding, not control. This love doesn't keep score. It doesn't remind you of your past mistakes every time there's tension. It doesn't weaponize your fears or vulnerabilities. Forgiveness is real here. Growth is mutual. Accountability exists without humiliation. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to evolve. When love feels like home, you don't feel the need to compete with anyone. You're not constantly comparing yourself to exes, to strangers, to imaginary threats. There's reassurance without suffocation, independence without distance, togetherness without possession. You can have a life outside the relationship and still feel deeply connected. This love understands that choosing each other is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice, and yet it doesn't make that choice feel heavy. It feels natural, like waking up and making coffee, like locking the door before you leave. It's not dramatic, it's intentional. You don't feel like you have to earn kindness here. Care is not a reward for good behavior. It's the baseline. You're not loved more on your best days and less on your hardest ones. Support doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. You're not abandoned emotionally when you need closeness the most. Love that feels like home is patient. It doesn't rush your healing. It doesn't pressure you to get over things on someone else's timeline. It understands that people carry history, that wounds don't vanish just because love arrives. It offers compassion instead of ultimatums. There's an ease in this love that can feel unfamiliar if you've only known chaos. At first, calm can feel boring, silence can feel suspicious, stability can feel undeserved. You might catch yourself waiting for the moment it all falls apart. You might feel the urge to test it, to provoke, to recreate the patterns you know. But this love doesn't take the bait, it stays steady, it stays kind, it stays. And slowly, something inside you begins to trust. Not all at once, not without fear, but little by little. Your nervous system learns that it doesn't have to stay on high alert. That peace is not a trick. That consistency is not temporary. You learn that love doesn't have to feel like a storm to be real. This kind of love values presence over performance. You don't have to impress. You don't have to constantly prove your worth. You don't have to be on all the time. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be quiet. You're allowed to just exist in the same space and let that be enough. It's in the small moments, shared meals without distraction, comfortable silences, gentle check-ins, a hand on your back when words aren't necessary. Remembering the things that matter to you, not because they were written down, but because they were noticed. Love that feels like home, respects your boundaries. It doesn't push past them and call it passion. It doesn't guilt you for having limits. It doesn't take your no personally. It understands that boundaries are not walls. They're doors that show how to love you properly. You don't feel like you're constantly explaining yourself. You don't feel misunderstood on a fundamental level. There's curiosity instead of judgment, effort instead of excuses. When something matters to you, it matters here too. This love doesn't disappear when life gets heavy. It doesn't run when things aren't easy. It stays grounded in reality, not fantasy. It understands that love is not about escaping pain, but about having someone beside you while you move through it. When love feels like home, you don't lose yourself. You become more yourself. You feel supported enough to grow, to change, to dream. You're not afraid that growth will create distance. Growth is encouraged, celebrated. You don't feel alone even when you're by yourself. There's a sense of connection that doesn't demand constant contact. Trust fills the space where anxiety used to live. You know where you stand. You know you are chosen, not just in words, but in actions. This love doesn't thrive on mystery or confusion. It thrives on clarity, on honesty, on showing up even when it's uncomfortable. It understands that real intimacy is built through truth, not games. You don't feel like you're waiting to be loved properly someday. You're experiencing it now, in real time, in ordinary moments, in imperfect days. Love that feels like home doesn't make you forget who you are. It reminds you. It reflects your worth back to you until you can see it for yourself. It doesn't complete you. It meets you, and when you think about the future, you don't feel fear tightening your chest. You feel grounded. You feel open. You feel steady, not because everything is guaranteed, but because whatever comes, you won't face it alone. Anxiety-based love is loud. It announces itself with urgency, confusion, and emotional whiplash. It pulls you in close one moment and pushes you away the next, leaving you trying to figure out what you did wrong. It keeps you alert, tense, and constantly scanning for signs that something is about to collapse. This kind of love doesn't settle into your body. It lives in your chest like a tight knot, in your mind like a never-ending loop of questions. When love is rooted in anxiety, peace feels unfamiliar, calm feels suspicious, silence feels like rejection. You don't relax when things are going well. You brace yourself. You wait. You anticipate loss. Even in moments of connection, you feel like love is something that could be taken away at any second, so you hold on to it tighter, even when holding on hurts. Anxiety-based love keeps you guessing. You're always trying to read between the lines. A delayed reply becomes a threat. A change in tone becomes a warning. You replay conversations, searching for hidden meanings. You analyze facial expressions, pauses, word choices. You don't experience love in the present. You experience it through fear of the future. This kind of love trains you to doubt yourself. When something feels off, you question your instincts. You tell yourself you're overreacting. You minimize your feelings to avoid conflict. You silence your needs because you don't want to be seen as difficult or demanding. Slowly, you learn to betray yourself in order to keep the connection alive. Anxiety-based love often feels intense at first. There's chemistry, excitement, unpredictability. The highs feel euphoric. Because the lows are so heavy, you mistake emotional chaos for depth. You believe that if something hurts this much, it must matter. You confuse attachment with connection, longing with love. In this space, affection becomes inconsistent. One day you're adored, the next day you're ignored. Kindness feels conditional, attention feels like a reward. Withdrawal feels like punishment. You start measuring your worth by how much closeness you receive. You feel responsible for keeping the relationship stable, even though stability never comes. Anxiety-based love thrives on imbalance. One person chases, the other distances. One person explains, the other withholds. One person overgives, hoping that effort will finally create security. The other remains unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, or inconsistent. This imbalance keeps the anxious person hooked, always trying harder, always reaching. Your nervous system stays activated. You're rarely at ease. Even during good moments, part of you is watching for signs of danger. You don't fully enjoy connection because you're afraid of losing it. You don't fully express yourself because you're afraid of pushing the other person away. Love becomes something you manage instead of something you feel. Anxiety-based love often begins with hope. You believe that if you just communicate better, love more patiently, give more understanding, things will change. You focus on potential instead of reality. You fall in love with who the person could be, not who they consistently are. You wait for clarity that never fully arrives. Boundaries feel difficult here. Saying no feels risky. Asking for reassurance feels embarrassing. Expressing needs feels like asking for too much. You learn to accept crumbs and call it compromise. You tolerate emotional distance and call it independence. You excuse hurtful behavior because you don't want to lose the connection. In anxiety-based love, conflict doesn't lead to resolution. It leads to confusion. Issues are brushed aside, minimized, or left unresolved. Apologies may come without change. Promises are made and broken. You're left carrying emotional weight that doesn't belong to you, trying to fix what you didn't break. There is often a sense of loneliness, even when you're not alone. You crave closeness, but don't feel truly seen. You want comfort, but don't feel safe asking for it. You want honesty, but fear the consequences of hearing the truth. So you live in a state of emotional hunger, never fully satisfied, never fully secure. Anxiety-based love teaches you to chase validation. You look for signs that you matter. A message, a compliment, a moment of attention becomes proof that you are valued. When those signs disappear, your sense of worth disappears with them. Love becomes external, something you receive or lose, rather than something grounded within. You may feel responsible for the other person's emotions. You walk on eggshells to avoid upsetting them. You manage their moods. You anticipate their reactions. Your own feelings take a back seat because keeping the peace feels more important than being honest. This kind of love often mirrors old wounds. It feels familiar because it reflects patterns you learned early on. Inconsistency feels normal. Emotional distance feels earned. You mistake struggle for commitment. You believe that love is supposed to be hard, that security is something you must fight for. Anxiety-based love doesn't allow rest. Even when things seem okay, you're waiting for the shift. You don't trust stability because you don't trust stability because you've never experienced it consistently. You stay hyper-aware, emotionally vigilant, exhausted from trying to keep everything together. You may blame yourself when geese go wrong. You assume you didn't love enough, understand enough, try hard enough. You internalize the instability and turn it inward. Self-doubt grows, confidence erodes. You become smaller in an attempt to be easier to love. Communication in anxiety-based love feels strained. Important conversations feel dangerous. You rehearse what you're going to say, hoping to choose the perfect words to avoid conflict. Sometimes you say nothing at all, choosing silence over the risk of abandonment. There is often a push and pull dynamic. Moments of closeness followed by distance, hope followed by by disappointment. Each time closeness returns, it reinforces the belief that things can improve, that this time will be different. The cycle continues because the relief feels powerful, even though it's temporary. Anxiety-based love can make you lose sight of what healthy connection looks like. You adjust your expectations downward. You normalize inconsistency. You tell yourself that no relationship is perfect, even when the lack of safety is affecting your mental and emotional well-being. Over time, your body remembers what your mind tries to ignore. Tension becomes constant. Sleep is affected. Peace feels out of reach. Your intuition speaks, but fear speaks louder. You stay because leaving feels scarier than staying. This kind of love keeps you future-focused in the worst way. You're always waiting for change, for improvement, for reassurance. You postpone your happiness, believing it will arrive once the relationship finally feels secure. The present moment becomes something to endure rather than enjoy. Anxiety-based love doesn't ask you to grow. It asks you to adapt, to adjust, to tolerate, to survive. It pulls your energy inward into worry and self-monitoring instead of outward into creativity, joy, and self-expression. You may feel deeply attached, but not deeply fulfilled. You may feel bonded through shared struggle rather than shared peace. The relationship becomes a source of stress rather than support. Even though you still care deeply, anxiety-based love teaches you to associate love with uncertainty, to believe that if something feels calm, it must be missing something, to feel uncomfortable when things are easy, to crave intensity even when it costs you your sense of self. And so you stay alert, you stay hopeful, you stay tired, you stay loving in a space that doesn't know how to love you back in the way you need. Choosing peaceful love requires unlearning chaos. It requires questioning the patterns that once felt normal but never felt safe. It asks you to look at what you were taught about love, not with blame, but with honesty. Because many people don't choose anxiety-based love on purpose. They choose what is familiar. They choose what is familiar. They choose what mirrors old dynamics. They choose what their nervous system recognizes, even when it hurts. Chaos can feel like chemistry when you've never known consistency. Emotional unpredictability can feel exciting when stability was never offered. You may have learned early on that love had to be earned, that affection came with conditions, that closeness was followed by distance. So when someone shows up calmly, steadily, without drama, it can feel foreign. It can feel uncomfortable. It can feel uncomfortable. It can even feel wrong. Unlearning chaos means understanding that your body may react before your mind catches up. You might feel restless in healthy connection. You might feel bored where there is actually peace. You might feel the urge to create tension just to feel something familiar. This doesn't mean something is missing. It means your system is recalibrating. Peaceful love doesn't activate the same survival responses. It doesn't trigger adrenaline or fear. It doesn't keep you on edge. Instead, it invites you to slow down. and slowing down can feel unsafe when you've spent years bracing for impact. Stillness can feel like vulnerability when you've learned to stay alert. Choosing peaceful love means learning to tolerate calm. It means allowing good moments to exist without waiting for them to be taken away. It means letting yourself enjoy connection without scanning for danger. This is not easy work. It goes against deeply ingrained habits, but it is necessary if you want love that doesn't exhaust you. Self-betrayal often hides in the name of love. You ignore your instincts. You minimize your discomfort. You convince yourself that your needs are unreasonable. You stay quiet to keep the peace, even when the peace is one-sided. Choosing peaceful love requires noticing these moments and gently refusing to abandon yourself anymore. This choice asks you to redefine strength. Strength is no longer about endurance or sacrifice, it's about honesty. It's about boundaries. It's about walking away from what feels familiar but harmful, even when attachment pulls you to stay. It's about choosing long-term safety over short-term comfort. Unlearning chaos also means facing the fear of being alone. Anxiety-based love often keeps you connected through fear of abandonment. Peaceful love asks you to believe that being alone is safer than being with someone who makes you feel unseen, unheard, or uncertain. That belief takes time to build. Choosing peaceful love requires patience with yourself. You won't get it right immediately. You may fall back into old patterns. You may confuse calm with lack of interest. You may miss intensity even when it drained you. This doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're learning. You begin to recognize red flags, not as challenges to overcome, but as information. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop negotiating for basic respect. You stop explaining your needs to people who consistently show they cannot meet them. You learn to listen to actions instead of words. Peaceful love doesn't ask you to abandon passion. It asks you to ground it. It allows desire without fear. It allows closeness without control. It allows depth without instability. It grows slowly, but it grows roots. Choosing this kind of love also means learning how to receive. You may be more comfortable giving than accepting. You may feel undeserving of ease. You may question kindness when it's freely offered. Peaceful love asks you to soften into care instead of deflecting it. You learn to sit with discomfort without turning it into drama. You learn to communicate instead of withdrawing. You learn that conflict doesn't have to threaten connection. That differences don't mean disconnection. That honesty doesn't have to lead to abandonment. Unlearning chaos means allowing yourself to be seen as you are, not as who you think you need to be loved. It means trusting that the right connection will not require you to perform, impress, or disappear parts of yourself. You start to notice how your body responds to different kinds of love. Anxiety tightens your chest. Peace relaxes it. Chaos speeds your thoughts. Safety slows them. You begin to trust these signals. You stop overriding them with logic or hope. Choosing peaceful love often means choosing slower beginnings, less intensity, more observation. You give yourself time to see consistency. You stop rushing intimacy. You let trust build naturally instead of forcing it. You become more selective, not because you're closed off, but because you value your energy. You understand that love should add to your life, not consume it. You stop mistaking emotional availability for boredom. Unlearning chaos also involves grief. Grief for the love you chased. Grief for the time you spent trying to be enough for someone who couldn't meet you. Grief for the version of yourself who believed love had to hurt to be real. But alongside grief, there is relief. Relief in no longer having to guess. Relief in not feeling anxious every time your phone is quiet. Relief in knowing where you stand. Relief in choosing yourself without guilt. Peaceful love teaches you that safety is not dull. It's spacious. It gives you room to grow, to rest, to breathe. It supports your individuality instead of threatening it. You stop asking, do they love me? And start asking, how do I feel when I'm with them? You prioritize how love lives in your body, not just how it sounds in words. Choosing peaceful love is not about perfection. It's about alignment about choosing connections that honor your nervous system, your values, your boundaries, about recognizing that love should feel grounding, not destabilizing. And as you unlearn chaos, you begin to realize that peace was never boring. It was just unfamiliar. Love that feels like home teaches you how to stay, not out of fear, not out of dependency, but out of choice. It shows you that commitment is not about losing yourself to keep someone else. It's about remaining present without abandoning who you are. This kind of love doesn't trap you. It anchors you. It gives you something steady to return to when the world feels uncertain. Staying becomes meaningful only when leaving is always an option. Peaceful love doesn't rely on guilt, obligation, or emotional debt. You're not held together by shared pain or unresolved trauma. You're held together by respect, trust, and a quiet understanding that both people are free and still choose each other. This kind of love allows space without creating distance. You can step back to breathe, to think, to grow, and the connection doesn't disappear. Independence is not mistaken for disinterest. Solitude is not taken as rejection. There is confidence in the bond, not panic when space appears. Love that feels like home doesn't monitor you. It doesn't track your movements, question your intentions, or demand access to every part of you. Trust exists without surveillance. Freedom exists without threat. You're not required to constantly reassure someone of your loyalty through sacrifice. You don't feel owned here. You don't feel claimed as territory. You feel welcomed, chosen, seen as a whole person, not as something to control or consume. Your individuality is not a problem to solve. It's something to protect. This love understands that people change. It doesn't cling to who you were when you first met. It grows with you. It adjusts. It listens. It allows evolution without fear that growth will lead to separation. Change is not treated as betrayal. When love feels like home, support doesn't come with strings attached. Help is offered freely, not later used as leverage. Care is not transactional. You don't feel like you owe love in exchange for kindness. Love exists because it wants to, not because it's keeping score. There is mutual responsibility here. Not burden, not pressure, but awareness. Each person understands the impact of their actions. Each person is willing to repair when harm is done. Accountability exists without shame. You don't feel like you're constantly proving your value. Your worth is not up for debate during disagreements. Respect remains even when emotions are strong. You're not threatened with withdrawal of love when you speak honestly. This love doesn't isolate you. It doesn't pull you away from your life, your friendships, your dreams. It doesn't demand exclusivity at the cost of your identity. Instead, it supports the life you had before and the one you're still building. You're not afraid to have a voice. Disagreement doesn't feel dangerous. You don't worry that one wrong opinion will cost you the relationship. You're allowed to be different without being distant. Love that feels like home makes room for reality. Bad days are allowed. Stress is allowed. Imperfection is allowed. You don't have to hide your struggles to remain lovable. You don't have to be strong all the time. This kind of love doesn't rush solutions. Sometimes it's with you. It understands that not everything needs to be fixed immediately. Presence matters more than advice. Listening matters more than winning. You're not punished for needing reassurance. You're not mocked for sensitivity. You're not dismissed for emotional depth. Feelings are treated as information, not inconveniences. When love feels like home, time is not used as a weapon. Silence is not used to control. Distance is not used to teach lessons. Communication remains open, even when things are difficult. You don't feel like you're competing with the past or with imaginary futures. You're not constantly measuring yourself against ghosts. The present is enough. The connection is grounded in what exists now, not in comparisons. This love doesn't demand urgency. There's no pressure to rush milestones just to prove commitment. Growth unfolds naturally. Decisions are made together, not forced by fear of loss. You don't feel the need to chase. You don't feel the need to beg. Effort flows both ways. Interest is shown without manipulation. Care is visible without being dramatic. Love that feels like home respects your healing. It doesn't reopen wounds just to see if you still bleed. It doesn't use your pain as proof of closeness. It protects what is tender. You learn that consistency is romantic, reliability is attractive, emotional maturity is deeply intimate. Safety becomes something you crave, not something you fear. This love doesn't confuse intensity with depth. It understands that real connection is built over time through shared experiences, through showing up when it's ordinary, not just when it's exciting. You don't feel exhausted by love, you feel supported by it. Your energy is not drained by constant emotional labor. Love becomes a place of restoration, not depletion. When you imagine a future here, it doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel like a gamble. It feels like a continuation of peace, not because everything will be easy, but because you trust how challenges will be handled. You stop bracing for impact. You stop preparing exit strategies in your mind. You stop expecting disappointment. You begin to settle into the present moment. Love that feels like home doesn't ask you to ignore red flags. It doesn't gaslight your intuition. It encourages honesty, even when the truth is uncomfortable. You're not afraid to be seen fully. Your flaws don't threaten the bond. Your past doesn't disqualify you. You're met where you are. This love allows joy without guilt, happiness without suspicion. You don't wonder when the good moment will end. You let it exist. You begin to understand that love was never meant to feel like survival. It was meant to feel like shelter, like warmth, like a place where you can lay down your defenses. And in that space, you don't disappear, you arrive.